It's standard. Food is cracking like it never has. Moses can blow up tomorrow. I don't know anything happened, but I was all fine until I just went to go put a few bamboos on the log crack at Bruce today, and I was like, whoa, it's different than 11 minutes. So that's no, but you just, like, I don't know if it was the one you where it was running from, but it was like some pitch, like, some ice skates and stuff on it, and slide, just off the glide tracks. I don't know what, that was preseason. Anyway, that's the only thing. Because glide slabs are unpredictable by nature, so that's the only like the unknown unknowns. They slide when you didn't think they were gonna. They don't slide when something comes off the slide. And we've never had an avalanche on a glide slab. We've never had a glide slab avalanche. We've had obviously much avalanche. So that'll be. It's fast. Things are fascinating. Thin stuff. Yeah, thin stuff is. Fascinating, but no, it's already got track down there. Not being. Yeah, so like everything was just amazing. It's just wonderful when it just snows for a month and doesn't do anything else. Like you can see, there's no layers in it. It's just all. Well, after the next meter of snow, if a meter of snow fell for a month, we would have lots of 7 days to do that month. Interesting thing. That's where my mind is. What will this winter surprise us with? We got some 70 yesterday, break 4. So fast. I mean, like I said, we may, because it's shallow over there, we may see, we may feel the faceting happening as we speak. Trees and, like, or, when you get, like, when you push the trees and stuff. But, like, as far as coverage, I mean, Robert and I were standing there. This is like year 11 for good lift on the way, so when we really looking at it, and remember Dave, but it seemed like the best we've seen since we had it, right? Yeah, it's just hard as a rock. It's just like, it's just. Yeah, so that is awesome actually in a way, but like, so we're always talking about the solar aspects, but this ring then is all about the windward aspects and the leeward aspects, and the windward stuff that's correct. And that was on the side.
I just want to give you guys the 5-minute warning. We got 5 minutes before we get started. Last chance to grab your coffee or tea and your snacks. 5 minutes.
So I haven't had a chance to talk to you again about the offer.
Yeah, all good, man. It was easy to get funding until I had to clear it over the new year. And then there's some shit it's kind of like, it's time to do this, right?
Yeah.
So I've been doing turkey heaters in every fall. If they're offering it again in the spring, it's going to be
yeah, I was trying to figure out. I just want to make sure give my team the chance to get the work if they want, but if you want. That's the first thing. But I also think like some kind of collaboration is great. Like some like smart kids help us work it. So. Yeah, well, but a guy like me who can't labor anymore has to think about that too, right? Like, I mean, we're probably coming up with that. There's a bit of that too on my mind. Yeah. Well, and I haven't even the higher up and you get some wins for them. Yeah,
I think people like the way you guys would have to have like hit and you'd have a form and you'd take a picture and it's like put it right into a database and then it's back from that database.
Well, what I have is the old books, right? But, and now apparently, like, are they there yet that you can like scan an old book and you can read it? Yeah, that's still a taking everything. Not with any amount of accuracy or quality, I guess.
Yeah, you might have to.
Yes, and then you crunch more numbers. You can get it to Rob and let him.
Oh, God. Tell
Let's get after it. Brass tacks here.
We'll be back here in the heckler.
Yeah, are you exactly?
That's the one that
All right, everybody. So welcome to the Rossland Museum and Discovery Center. We are so excited to have you guys here for the State of the Snowpack here in Rossland tonight. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that we're aware that we live and work on the unceded Snai Tumulao. So that means that we are on the unceded grounds of the Snai homeland. So with that, Red Mountain, it had a name long before Red Mountain. You might have heard this before, but I'm trying to make sure everyone knows Camarkin. Camarkin is the name that this mountain has known for thousands of years. And if you guys can know it and share it around, it'll make Snai feel in a spot where they can feel comfortable, come back to their own home because you're a part of that resurgence. Now before we go any further, I want to get you guys to the reason you're here tonight, which is to hear Keith talk. Keith has had over 30 years experience as an avalanche educator, as well as I believe wrote a lot of the courses for the AST 1 and 2. So you know, no big deal. It's kind of a big deal around Rossland here. Without any further ado, Keith, I'll get you to come. Please steal the floor from me and give the people what they want. Everyone, Keith.
Yeah, it's really fun to be back here to do the State of Snowpack. So, yeah, just neat to see the interest. Obviously, there's lots of folks that are interested in what's happening out there, and so, yeah, if you can have an interactive kind of adventure tonight, all the better, because, yeah, we're all out there. I feel like I'm still learning, and it's just exciting to get to play in mountains. So Spark Steves and I have been buddies for a long time. Those of you that have looked at the AST handbook, we're sort of famous in that for a story called No LSD is the chapter of one of the stories in that book, and it's about he and I going up and using our skills at Kootenai Pass in 2011. And, we had a close call that day, and it was a lot of learning. He and I go way back, and we talk together throughout the winter, just to geek out on snow. We love doing that, and talk about layers and talk about what's happening in the Rossland Range. And so we're going to kind of do a little bit of that tonight, and I'm going to let him get us started with talking about the state of Snowpack. Spark Steves. I didn't really probably complete enough of an introduction, but Spark is the head avalanche forecaster at CAA professional and fellow snow.
You just took my presentation. What else about me? Hey, how's it going? So, first time for me speaking at the state of Snowpack, so thanks Keith for getting me up here. I have been active in the mountains for 38 years, backcountry skiing for that whole time, and skiing my whole life. And skiing brought me to the mountains, brought me to some of this stuff, education and snow, Does anybody know the avalanche triangle? 3 pieces of an avalanche. Remember that? There's 3 things that get together that can get you in trouble in the mountains or not. What's that?
Snow.
Snow is one, yes.
People. Avalanche conditions, avalanche terrain, and humans.
Yeah, that's right. Snow, terrain, and people. So because I didn't really know what to do here, but I had a big wig avalanche guru come and check out our program at Red about 5 years ago, and he said, break it down, man. Keep it simple. This was Colin Zacharias, a guide guy, and he said, snow, terrain, and people. Look at your range that way. Look at your challenges that way, and obviously eliminate the people. And I'm guessing I'm in a room full of people who don't want to be eliminated from the snow and terrain, which is great. So, anybody been backcountry skiing for a decade? Less than a decade. Put up your hand. Sure. I gotta be honest. I was expecting a way older crowd. The last event I came to at the museum, it was all white hairs and ski pros. So we've got some, like almost half the room maybe is less than 10, 20 year backcountry skiers. Anybody who's sure? Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And then what about?
I went 20 years ago, but then I had
Then you did.
starting 20 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh.
And some people who've been like say pretty active for 20 years. Any 30 year mountain folk in the crowd? Right. Now. So just a few of us here. Like I said, I expected a few more, and I always realize that I'm probably talking to somebody who knows way more than me about most topics. So, let's talk about. So that's kind of an idea of the people and the kind of people. What I know about the people in the Rossland Range is they start skiing avalanche terrain very young. And that's on Granite Mountain and Red Mountain. But you look at, I think a beer belly is the classic thing where if your kid has a ski beer belly, by the time they're 5, it's so is he gonna make it? Swim in this life? And I have 2 kids, and that's a for sure. What up, beer belly? Let go of my pole. and you're skiing, this 50 degree, 40 plus degree convex roll. Never mind the the fact that it's a rock slab in the summertime and that there's boulders at the bottom that people have fallen into and been lost for some hours apparently. So that makes me think, you know, if you've skied here your whole life, you've seen you've skied avalanche terrain a lot, so that, I always find that an interesting factor. Rosslanders love ski and powder. A lot of us moved here for the combination of ski terrain and powder, right? And it seems to happen, you know. Powder skiing gets us out there on those steep slopes, and yeah, anyway, we're an interesting crowd, and like I said, I'm never in a room without lots of experience when I'm at a Rossland. Sorry, so it's a little nerve-wracking to talk. That's something about the people. What about the terrain here? I've spent the last few years kind of working on Avi Atlas for like pictures and shots and ski cuts all over the Red Mountains CRA, which is kind of like Mount Gray, Roberts, Kirkup, Granite, of course, and Red. So looked at that and did a lot of time on Google Earth and looked at a lot of different angles. At some point, I just kind of caught this angle. I'm like, we live among these ancient volcanoes. It's really cool. If you kind of you goof around on Google Earth or look at pictures and you get the right angle on this, and you can see these calderas. And I figured like Granite Basin there between Gray. I almost said it. Between Gray and Granite. I think that was a giant mountain that blew up and was maybe even bigger than Ogle or so. But that's another interesting. But our terrain is steep, and I think that's, you know, it's a lot below tree line. We have a lot less challenges than other people, but it's really steep, and we really start skiing steep terrain at 3 or 4 years old. You get to really like it by the time you're 70 or so. But so, you know, those factors play on each other too. And like I said, we're below tree line, so a lot of our terrain, I kind of, in the evaluator card, there's a question about terrain traps, and I kind of pretty much tick it if I'm skiing in the Rossland Range. You're always skiing above a terrain trap, I feel like here. So we've got less challenges. We have less overhead challenges, less fetched, less big areas of fetch. You guys know what fetch is? Like kind of a big snowy place that's on the windward side and it blows onto the other. So we have less of those big features other than up on Old Glory, but we have these steep little rock slabs and various below tree line that go up to, you know, where service orders farmed and just pretty steep below tree line features. So I think a lot less challenge. I think it's a pretty friendly place to cut your teeth ski touring, but I think we say we're always surprised by something every year, and it's different than in the big mountains, and that's also what makes it awesome. And what was the third part of that? Snow, yes. So, and I think that was, you know, and kind of work down, but what we had was, I'll start at the bottom up. We had a month of dumping with a couple warm-ups in it, and you sort of, when you're living in that, you know a bit about snow. You're like, look, there's no layer forming, there's nothing happening, and that's kind of been the case. And I think it's interesting that you know, the best times for persistent weak layer avalanches are just when it just keeps snowing from the ground up at the beginning of the year. And it's been a few years since I've seen that happen around here, and so that's the snowpack this year. And but really simple, you know. There was I started working late October at the ski. We had zero snow on the upper. We've got a sonar at the top, and it took a few dumps before it pushed it down, pushed it from below 0 to 0. And then the month of November, it grew to, does anybody remember, was anybody on Remembrance Day? It was piss pop pouring rain and wet, and so we had a little crust there. That was about 30 cms up. And then we had another couple weeks of walloping snow, and got to another warm up just around so that was I think we'll call it the November 13th, this is called the Remembrance Day crust. And then a wallop of snow on that, and a little warm up around November 23rd, and then snow on that on the 25th. We call it the Sparky's birthday crust. And then we've got about 30 cms on that now. So, Keith, I called Keith up, I should say, this week, and was like, oh, what are we going to talk about? And it's funny, the first thing he said, well, tell me how great it is. Isn't this awesome? We're like, there's no layers. And I told him, it's interesting, like, well, we're forming one right now. And I felt like you're a very half glass full effect, and I just immediately was like, so when I think about that right now, like we're way up in the snow, but we're still early December. We're many dumps, and hopefully many dumps, and some droughts away from the end of the season. And I think of things from that kind of dualistic Buddhist way, the double-edged sword. So one thing goes up and another thing goes down. And Keith's glass half full to me was like, yeah, but it's great. There's pretty much nothing to worry about down below us, under our feet right now. But we're skiing on this crust that's faceting out with these mixed temps. We had a little surface and then the future. And the duality to me is that, yes, we've had a great month of skiing, and that was the other thing I was going to ask: who's been backcountry skiing already this Put your hand up if this was last year. Yeah, I went to Alaska. But we get further up in the snowpack, and I'm sort of, I guess, assuming a drought, which has happened since. And people assured me in October and November that was not going to happen. and let me tell you, I was in for a busy winter if I'd have believed all my friends. and I can talk about that in a minute. But as we get further up in the snowpack, we've got no worries below us, but we do have somewhat less anchoring below us, and I feel like that persistent weak layer that is probably going to happen every winter, being a meter up, is going to be more reactive than a persistent, that crappy layer of surface where that's 40 or 50. So I kind of, that's what the duality that I spun into this is that, yeah, it's great, but the drought is coming, and we will be further up. And we noticed that, I think, last winter, where we didn't have much snow, but we were hanging about a meter, and then we had that the next big drought, and then we had a very active spring. I was just kind of looking through some weather scribblings from last year. It was like, 4, 4, and 3, high avalanche danger. So that's just one of the things we're going to be aware of this winter, as we're probably going to make a persistent weak layer. Maybe it'll rain all over this and not. And we will be further off the ground than usual, and our legs will be stronger, and we'll be more stoked. So there's always that too. But I always, or I don't always, but I just thought of that this winter, like, this is great, everything's great. And I guess I am a bit of a pessimist, because I was like, what does this mean? What's going to break different this year? Because something always kind of breaks when you work at Red Mountain, or when you work in the ski business, right? There's always, too much snow, and the lifts will eventually stop. The power will go out. It happened already once this fall. We're like, it's dumping. And eventually a tree will fall on a power line, or an avalanche will happen. Something will give. So I'm interested about, where, let's say we have, we get back into snow and we just have a great winter, but where will a great winter take us with risk and hazard? Are our tree well hazards going to increase? Right now, there's blackjack's closed. Yeah. There's trees falling on everybody, so So, you know, we may go down in avalanche danger, but I mean, the real issue is not dying, the danger of, or, you know, living, not dying, living. And it's curious to see if we'll have, you know, will that deeper snowpack in our first persistent week layer bring different challenges, or maybe we'll be all good, or you know, we'll be challenged in different ways this winter. You know, if you're an extreme skier, it's like really great to ski powder. You're not going to slide for life, but you might die in an avalanche. But once that snow gets hard, suddenly you're probably not going to get in an avalanche at all. But I've seen people sliding down mountains with that's another story. That's what I have on the snowpack this season. Like I said, it's a pretty easy snowpack. You will be safe for the next 24 hours to ski. But it's not that great according to Keith. That's my brief synopsis of the Rossland Range this winter. If anybody has any questions? Yes, Pete.
How about regionally? What are you hearing from up north? What are you hearing from the
There seems to be a line right now, like I've been looking at the northern Montashis, like Mustang Powder and up kind of north of Cherryville. It seems to be, they're talking about some slab avalanche activity from that, kind of from the freezing rain that came as snow for them. But down south here, we're all green, 111, and not much happening. Some sloughing in steep terrain as things facet out, and the crust is weakened by the faceting.
You seen the alder go down like this before?
This is great. I need to go back to my little. I have yellow books back to 1977. So and if you ever want to geek out and ask me a question, I'll run that there and just read through my old books and look what John Tweedy was doing when he was 25, or Bob Sawyer. But this is spectacular. I'm having a hard time remembering a start that's good, and to be challenged by working at the ski hill. It's all about setup. We're usually just trying to get some bamboo to stand up, like not even thinking about that right now. We make tripods with bamboos and tie them together with black tape and like. No, don't put the thinner rope on it. And this year we're like, we've got lots of snow and now we just have to deal with everyone asking us, when are you going to open? What's going on? Yes, dude, you're going to open. Saturday.
Everything?
Oh. Keith warned me about this. I am not at liberty to say, but I would.
Come on.
Not a lot, really. Granite is definitely going to open. We're going to throw a few shots at booties tomorrow, which is going to maybe surprise you guys in town. But we have some glide slab issues there that kind of surprised us a bit, so we're just going to test that out. So Granite will be good to go, and Gray will be soon after. But I might want to peek over the edge a few times on Saturday or listen if I'm skiing on the base and see if Gray maybe opens that day. Yes.
Was there a lot of wind transport on the north side, or?
This year it's been pretty steady, really. The heights of snow have been kind of interesting, and like decent down low. It's 60 cms at the base, like right at the bottom of the ski hill now, which is pretty good. Mm-hmm. And we're not seeing huge transport. There's a bit of cornice buildup. We chopped a little cornice on Gray, and but not. It's not like a super variable depth snowpack right now. Even the south of Gray is well sealed in snow. Well, thanks a lot. And
Thank you.
Yeah, bud. That was great. I was thinking about coverage issues at Red, and, all the different years. There was only one year that I remembered, it was like 98, 99, where I kind of got a little bit disappointed later in the season. It wasn't even that late, because it just started and kept going for so long. Because, I just love the features And they got really good at like 1.5 meters, you know, where it was just like really good coverage. And I sort of feel like, you know, that kind of level is maybe even going to be sooner this year than 1.5 meters, just because it's so solid, the base, and that, you know, freezing rain crust, although it's certainly hurting quality, you know, somewhere people are saying, yeah, it's, you know, it's challenging skiing out there right now until we get some more snow, but again, all that stuff is going to help hold things together, you know, when people start, you know, coming in hundreds and thousands and things start getting, you know, scraped. You know, I think cliffs and, you know, our favorite places are going to hold up probably a little bit better. But back to that story, I remember, you know, it's like, yeah, 1.5 meters, everything just felt really good and covered, and, you know, it was so fun, and 2 meters was great, and 2.5, it's like, got over 2.5, and I was like, why is this not as much fun as it was before? And I realized that we had so much snow that it smoothed everything out, and a lot of the cool features that we like to ski were gone. Anyway, I hope we have that problem again this year. That's wild. We're going to talk about a few things. I do have some information on some other places as well. I took a group to Kootenai Pass on Monday, it was, for an AST, just because, you know, I was a little bit worried in the Rossland Range that somebody was going to get hurt, and I thought there was a little more snow at Kootenai Pass than there was. There wasn't that much more than here, but, you know, we just tried to ski low angle, and it was challenging. But yeah, there was like, you know, 15 over that crust, and the crust there was a little bit thicker. And thicker, I think, is better in terms of stability, because it provides, how many people are familiar with the term bridging? Bridging. You know, it can kind of take care of what's underneath if there's a thick enough crust. And but the Rossland Range, I'm guessing, is a little bit thinner of a crust and sometimes breaking through, and, you know, and I think it'll be fine as long as we keep getting snow and just kind of bury it. But if it stays, if that crust stays, you know, within, say, the top 50 centimeters of the snowpack for another month, you know, then you can get all sorts of issues with that crust breaking down. You get facets forming near the crust and weak layers that can, you know, wreak havoc. So, you know, everything, it's so fun to hypothesize because nobody knows. And I think one of my learnings in the avalanche field is the longer that I am in this, the more I learn, and the more I learn, the more I realize that I don't want to count on anything. You know, but I'm open to being surprised. And I don't know, philosophically, I think that's actually a good way to live my life too. You know, rather than always looking toward, you know, what's going to happen, what's the end result. You know, just realizing that along the way there's going to be surprises. Good. So let's kind of move on a little bit. That's me. Yeah, maybe like go back to last year and the year before, just to give us some perspective. I mean, it's not like huge spikes like it was back here in 2008 and 2009, but I did notice that 23 and 24 is the first time since 2008, 2009 that we had 2 years in a row above the 10-year moving average. I think most people are not surprised by 2023. If you remember, you know, it was just a really, really challenging snowpack because we had, you know, the opposite of what we have now, which is a bunch of early season snow that then was followed by a really long drought and really cold temperatures. You know, so it's kind of the combination of shallow snowpack and cool temperatures that often drives the snowpack into kind of a dangerous place for potential weak layers that then come back to haunt us as we then finally start to get snow. And that happened in 2023 to a large extent. You know, if you need reminders. It took a little while before, you know, we kind of got to that critical threshold. It was sort of the end of December in 2023 leading into 2022 leading into 2023. And then fatalities started in the second week of January, and there was like a succession of them. It was really scary because so many people were getting surprised by that snowpack, and we had persistent and depersistent avalanche problems throughout most of the winter. And you know, it's one of those things where the likelihood of triggering those avalanches, especially as time goes on, often goes down, but the consequences is always so big. So a little later in the presentation, I just wanted to show you something that, you know, will be happening over the next year with some of the tools that Avalanche Canada uses for helping people make risk-based decisions. But anyway, and then last year I was a little bit surprised, but as Sparky mentioned earlier, the spring ended up being a little bit more of a challenging time of the year, and what looked like it was going to be not too many avalanche fatalities, in many cases because there was so little snow at the beginning of the season, you know, turned into a little bit above, at least above the 10-year moving average. Yeah, in any case, it's just often, you know, not that we want to be morbid and look at how many people die, but it's just helpful for us to keep those things in perspective. You know, and it's not to scare people and say, oh, you shouldn't go into the backcountry because you might die, because actually if you know, drive your car, you might die. And if you know, live a life, you know, there's all sorts of things that can take us. So, you know, we manage risk in the backcountry by taking degrees of risk. And I think, you know, both Spark and I have had our share of you know, things like, ooh, that was a little close. At the same time, we've got sort of a disciplined way of making decisions that really helps us, you know, probably the fact that we're still here has something to do with those, you know, good decisions about, you know, taking degrees of risk but trying not to take too much. And that's what the tools are all about, and the avalanche forecast is all about. It's amazing. I think it was 2022, 23, and I can't remember about last year, but you know, people are getting the message, and very few people are dying in high danger anymore. That used to not be the case. People would die in high danger, you know. But I think the backcountry community is so savvy now that you know, people pay attention when the danger's up. And you know, the thing is that a lot of the year, the avalanche danger is between moderate and considerable, and it's challenging to, you know, kind of decide, you know, what am I going to ski, what am I going to avoid, and you know, for me, it's really about paying attention to the avalanche problems that are in the bulletin, because those give us that direction as to what is probably good to ski in moderate or considerable danger and what should be avoided. So, all right, well, let's keep moving on. I was going to show just a video just so you can see the snowpack in the Rossland Range.
I just want to ask.
Yeah, question.
Well, that chart, was it, like, is that, those numbers are those people? Those
People,
are
yeah,
deaths?
numbers.
But I guess
fate.
what I'm thinking is more people are doing it, so like, you'd want the deaths to go down, but you have to consider the fact that maybe more more average people are
Oh,
taking
yeah.
backcountry skiing.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Norman, because, this is a very good news graph, like, I'm like
Yeah.
finding a little, we're 2 times above the
Yeah.
moving average. But no, this is like a very good news story, and it follows the theme of, like I said, backcountry skiers are very savvy, because if per capita of skier, it should be going up because the number of skiers from 2004 to 24 is what?
Yeah.
What do you guys figure?
Yeah.
10 times, wow, maybe that much. I mean, it's definitely more than double or triple, but somewhere in between those. And so the fact that the number of fatalities, if you look at this, I mean, that's why you do a 10-year moving average, that it's actually been flattening to slightly going down. That's incredible, and that speaks to, a lot of things. I think really good forecasts is, that's what I've noticed is, I say this is kind of a controversial thing to say, but I think that avalanche forecasts were a little bit too conservative 20 years ago. And I used to hear lots of people say, oh yeah, they always call it that, and but we've been out there and it's not considerable. But these days I find that when I look at the avalanche forecast and I look at, I have a lot of tools available to me now in terms of numbers of avalanches happening, they every day try to get it spot on. There's no oh, well, let's just keep it, considerable for an extra couple days because we're worried. It's like, nope, today's the day, we've moved because of the definitions of the danger rating scale. We've moved from considerable to moderate, we're calling it moderate. And I think that in a lot of ways that's had a positive effect on people's risk taking because now the attitude around the bulletin is that, it's obviously not going to be perfect 100% of the time, but I think it's pretty close almost all the time. And so I think people use that to, in a very positive way, to risk manage their risk. You guys think? Yeah. Cool. All right. Okay, so let me see if I can just have this lovely sunny day. It might be fun to check in on.
Battery 20%. Connected to Nashville Air Tube and Keith Robine's iPhone.
Hey, this is Keith Robine and Nick Padwan from Kootenai Avalanche Courses. And it is December 2nd, 2024. And it is a good day out here. And an excellent start to the season, as I'm sure you all know. Everyone's excited. There's a lot of tracks in the Rossland Range. People have been getting after it, and it's great conditions too right now. The avalanche danger is moderate, low, low. The avalanche problem is wind slab. Yesterday it was low, 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 so it's just these isolated wind slabs that you might see in the Alpine. It's almost always the case in the Alpine where wind slabs can crop up with really any sort of conditions. So far down here we're at tree line elevation, no sign of wind slab. We're at 20-40 meters. Let's do a little test just so you can see what's happening in this glorious snowpack. We've got a height of snow here of 135 centimeters, December 2nd. We'll take that. And we'll do a compression test here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We do 10 light taps. Now some medium taps, 11, 12. Oh, we had exactly the same result last time. You can see there's a layer right here. And we looked at it the last time. I'm not going to disturb it, but we did find some really small surface ore in there, down 25, maybe size 2 to 3. Is it going to be a problem? It's so hard to know. But it's pretty small. you know, if it's a problem, it'll maybe show up with the next storm cycle. There's another storm coming in on Friday. So, you know, we'll pull back a little bit when the next storm comes in and see if this starts to react. But probably not. Okay, so that was on the 12 tap. And we did check this layer. It's planar, but it's kind of resistant. All right, so 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You can see it's kind of wanting to move. So there is a layer there. Now we're going to go with the harder taps, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. And there, you saw this layer here. And there's another layer there. Cover doesn't want to hold together well. That's down 40 centimeters. So that was on the 28th tap. It's also resistant. And just above it, we checked it out. There was a very, very thin, like thinner than an eggshell crust. And so you're getting a little bit of, you know, for those of you that understand snow metamorphosis, you always get a little bit of faceting just underneath the crust. And that's probably what's causing that layer. Just finish the test, 29, 30. Now, here's what's so good about this thing. Sure, the upper portion of it is powdery. It's making for great skiing. But as you get down here underneath this 40 layer, it gets to the point where it's pretty hard just to get a finger in. And then by the time you get to here, it's really hard to get a finger in. So we call this pencil snow. And pencil snow just is really solid. It just helps the whole snowpack bond. And what you're going to see here when I pull this block off is that it's just really solid. And look at the bottom of the snowpack. Remember last year and the year before as well? We had facets because we had early season snow and cold temperatures, lots of facets along the bottom. And that is not the case. Like, this is just good pencil snow right to the ground. So a nice solid base. And then, as I said, if you just pull this off, you know, here's this fluffy block. And like that, solid. Woo. So, I think that's probably good for now. That's the state of the snowpack. It's good. Moderate, low, low. We'll see what happens to those little resistant layers, down 25, down 40. It might be isolated to some locations and not others. These are good. Enjoy.
The real gift can't be wrapped with a bow. The real gift moves like this, sounds like this, and feels like this.
Yeah, so just take a moment here to see if anybody had any questions about what we talked about there in the video.
Where were you?
That was kind of in between Unnecessary Ridge and Old Gordon. So obviously there's been a little bit that's happened since then, not a ton. So I said, this was December 2nd, I said there's another storm coming on the weekend, Friday. So Friday night, Saturday was when we had the freezing rain event, and then about 5 centimeters of snow on top. Does that sound about right? So the concern that week was that during that week, that surface hoar was growing bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's like really good size, 10. I saw lots of surface hoar that was over 10 millimeters, and that's big surface hoar if it gets preserved with the next snowfall. So the bad news was that we had this rain event, or freezing rain event, but the good news is that it seems to have somewhat melted that surface hoar layer, kind of melted and frozen, and I'm still finding a little bit of surface hoar underneath it, and that's why, you know, in some locations, you know, especially if you don't get lots of snow, maybe that's going to turn into a problem. And again, it's just always maybe, because we just have to wait and see. And nature just has incredible variability with regards to what it does and how layers really, 30-year professionals, 40-year professionals are always saying, oh, we're surprised. So,
would that surface floor be at higher elevation still? Above the range?
The good news there is that it seems like that event went pretty high. And that's because typically a freezing rain event, it actually was cold enough in our typical mountain areas to be snow. But the reason that it was freezing rain is that there was some warmer air even higher, right? So the warm air was probably above the height of granite, and it was, it changed whatever precipitation was falling to just rain. And then as it came down, it got colder, and typically when it hits the surface, it's frozen. So probably that's the case. I'm kind of excited because I get to work up at Kokanee Glacier, and when I was up there for a training week last week, and the storm came in just at the end before I came out on Saturday, there was absolutely no rain, and talking with the people that are up there this week, besides the sun crust that formed last week, there's no rain event. There's no freezing rain event. So they just have powder. And that surface floor, which was big there too, I'm guessing is preserved. Now there's only about, just under 20 centimeters on top of it, which isn't really enough snow to form a cohesive slab. So they haven't been getting avalanches, no lumps, no cracking. But when another 20 falls on top of that and it consolidates, I'm wondering if that area may turn out to be a little bit of a hot spot in terms of avalanche activity.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, have you been up there?
No, I was just wondering about the surface water and where that rain crust was not rain crust.
From what Sparky and I have been reading, because we get to read about other operations, it sounds like everybody got a freezing rain event. So it was kind of shocking that somehow Kokanee escaped it.
When was the freezing rain event?
Friday night into Saturday.
That was in the Valhalla's Friday, and it was the frost was crazy. I also sled, so it was I could just take my hand and go like this on top of everything.
And that's why we were so worried.
Yeah, so I could see it kind of being worse in the Valhallas later on if you get a bunch of snow on top of that.
Right, and there may be pockets of areas in the Valhallas too that didn't get the freezing rain event. So, you can find out just by digging. You don't have to do any fancy sort of test. You just dig down, and if the crust is there, that's going to help. The thicker the crust, the better. But if there's no crust, then one would imagine that that surface ore from last week is preserved, and it certainly might turn into a persistent heat layer. So it's kind of exciting to see what happens. Cool. What else? Oh, maybe I should do a slideshow. I feel like we've already started talking about this. This is just outside the Rossland Range. It's really hard to know. I mean, when we have starts like we had, say, 2 years ago, and I'm pretty sure I gave a talk at that point, it was this is going to be challenging. And I think what Sparky and I are saying is that it could be good, which is better than this is probably going to be really challenging. And it all depends on, as he said, talked about those long droughts. There have been winters, I remember, when it just kind of keeps snowing, and it doesn't even have to snow a lot. It just has to be fairly consistent, and that can make for a really solid snowpack, because there's just not enough time between storms for surface hoar layers, cold faceting to take place. And if it just builds up, even if it's gradual, then that can lead to a really good snowpack. But, that's asking for a lot. We're going to get over there. Any other thoughts?
Let's say just a little quick point about surface ore, and just to maybe a little positive note on the surface ore you're talking about, Kofi. Surface ore on powder is better than surface ore on a crust, of course, right? So that surface ore is kind of sharp and pointy, and good news is as that 20 cms you're talking about kind of settles onto it, it does kind of push into a softer snowpack.
Right.
The really bad is when you have that combo, and I don't know, with the inversion, maybe the solar aspects you might have.
Oh,
right. We'll have some variability with that, with the places that were inverted and whether there's surface ore on the crust. But
yeah, and I guess thanks for reminding me, because we still haven't really talked about what's on the surface right now, which is a combination of surface ore on more polar aspects and some sun crust on the solar aspects. And so that's what the next storm, which seems to be on a weekly basis here, Friday night into Saturday, is going to fall on. And so once again, we're just going to have to wait and see whether it potentially forms a layer that could end up lasting for very long. I just wanted to talk a little bit about this aspect of making decisions and risk management. The daily process is just something that came together in 2018 with the writing of the Avalanche Skills Training Handbook. And it was just a way to kind of mimic what professional organizations do in terms of managing risk on a daily basis, and and what recreationists do too. Like I asked lots of recreational skiers as we were working on this, how do you make decisions? And it was pretty consistent that people would say, well, I get the forecast, and then we talk about where we're going to go, and when we get our gear together, and that happens before we go out in the field, and then once we're out there, we check to see how much snow fell and what the wind is and what the temperatures are, and look for signs of avalanches, and try to use good travel habits to minimize the number of people we expose, and then we look at individual slopes and then make decisions about what we want to ride and what we want to avoid based on the avalanche forecast, including the danger rating and the avalanche problems. And then, not everybody was like, then we reflect on the day, but it is something that is kind of a standard procedure in professional operations. The PM meeting where, you just take the information that you got during the day and share that with your team. So I like to reflect on the day, to ask ourselves those questions, because it's just such a great learning opportunity to wonder, what did we do well, and what could we do better? And I love this question, which is, where did we take the most amount of risk today? I think that's a really interesting discussion, because some people might, have differing opinions on, oh, well, I thought it was, when we were crossing that one path, and someone else might think, actually, I thought it was, when we dropped into that second line, and, so, what a great discussion that can be, because, there's no right answer necessarily as to where you took the most risk, unless it triggered an avalanche, I guess. There's so many different factors. So I love this. I think there's ways to, keep it fairly simple. The kind of foundation of all of this decision making is this tool, which has now been around for over 15 years, and it's held up. It just kind of gives us kind of a green go signal versus a red don't go signal, and then that very interesting yellow area that lies in between. And when looking at avalanche fatalities, like I said, 20 years ago there were lots of people getting in trouble in high danger and or kind of the higher ends of considerable. But what seems to have happened over time is that now people are more savvy, but the tricky area is this yellow area, which doesn't mean like just yellow. Sometimes when you see the yellow light, that means put your foot on the gas to get through the intersection. In the avalanche world, that's where you can get into trouble. And sometimes, it does make sense to put your foot on the gas because you're already partway through, but sometimes actually it makes more sense to slow down and stop. And obviously I'm creating some sort of metaphor, but that's the name of the game. And so when you look at, say, like, the tricky year that we had 2 years ago, a lot of people were not dying here in the red, they were dying here in the yellow. Because it was just so tricky. And persistent, deep persistent layers. Anybody have any idea, if you look at all the different avalanche problems, what percentage of people die in persistent and deep persistent avalanche problems versus storm slab, wind slab, loose wet, all that stuff? Any guesses? You make a guess?
60.
What did I hear?
60.
60? Others?
80-20.
It's 70. It's 70%. So it's only 30% of avalanche fatalities are due to storm slabs, wind slabs, loose wet slabs. And it's persistent and deep persistent slabs that take the vast majority of.
That makes sense though, because storm slab is so predictable.
It's way more predictable, storm slabs, right? Because of the temporal aspect of them. Typically they're most reactive within 24 to 48 hours after the storm, whereas persistent and deep persistent are so unpredictable. There's another reason why, and deep. Deep is just the same as a persistent slab, but it's just, it's been buried even longer, typically like closer to a month or more. But there's another reason that they take more lives. It's a little too obvious, which is why you're not getting it.
Bigger.
Because what?
They're bigger.
They're deeper. They're deeper than storm slabs, and so the consequences of, say an 80 centimeter slab is often, way more than, say, a 30 or 40 centimeter storm slab. So it's that combination of the, less predictable and bigger consequential. So I feel like, we've sort of, I never really said this before, but I think it kind of makes sense, that we've sort of evolved as a backcountry community to, be on target and, mostly avoiding these, kind of red light conditions. But there is that zone in the middle where, it's still pretty challenging out there to navigate this. And, some people can, you can manage your risk by always staying in the green. And there's very few avalanche fatalities that happen in that area. But,
That's no fun.
yeah, I was going to make some sort of comment, but Kel said it first. That means that you would never go into complex terrain. And so, many of us do like to challenge ourselves in some of And a couple more things before we wrap up. This is very similar to this other one, and right. So it kind of uses the same idea, and there's going to be, at least the plan is that there's going to be a update to the slope evaluation card that's part of the evaluator and comes with the trip plan. So the evaluator is actually kind of two tools are the trip planner and the slope evaluation card. And the slope evaluation card is, I gotta say this in a way that's not too politically incorrect. It's pretty complicated to use it. Like all the things that it asks you to think about in terms of avalanche conditions and terrain are like really good, but it's like a lot of number crunching. And it's just a hard thing to do when you're out there and, you know, there's powder and you want to ride, and it's like, okay, are we going to stop and do this number crunching with the slope evaluation card? It's a little bit of a hard tool, and I'm always a fan of simpler is better. And so what I've been thinking about for many years, and this is kind of the most recent formulation of all that thinking, is let's take this tool, the trip planner tool that's so successful and so easy to use because it's simple enough, and just add this idea of, another layer besides just simple, challenging, complex terrain. What about the consequences, right? I mean, because that's how we end up deciding what we're going to ski and what we're going to avoid. If it's, say, a considerable danger day, and we're kind of tiptoeing into some small features of avalanche terrain, sure, we're going to feel a lot more comfortable getting into something that's more like a minimal to modest consequence, and we're going to be avoiding those things that are modest to serious consequence. And even when it's moderate danger, and we're getting into complex terrain, we're going to ask ourselves a lot of questions before we step into that more serious kind of consequence terrain. And so this is, still a pretty simplistic tool, but it just sort of adds that layer of consequence. And I was just, working on this and maybe I can, use this as an opportunity to challenge you to think about what are the factors that influence consequence. And before you come up with anything, try to come up with it maybe even in kind of an ordered fashion of, what would be, in your mind, the most important factor that influences, how serious the consequence of the slope. Now, one way to think of it is terrain trap. And terrain trap, I've always liked the term, but what I don't like about terrain trap is it's a binary concept, right? So it's either like a yes or a no. Is it a terrain trap? Is it not a terrain trap? And I kind of scratch my head and go, I don't know how to answer that question, because there's very few slopes that are like completely free of any terrain trap. A terrain trap is anything that increases the consequences, right? So it means you're going to hit stuff or you're going to potentially get buried deeper. And maybe there's a smooth slope in the alpine that just has a nice roll and avalanche debris would spread out. But I mean, what do we normally ski, especially around here? When the trees. Sparky mentioned the same thing. You're always thinking about what's going to happen if you get an avalanche. So it's like degrees of it. So if we were to break that down, just for simplicity's sake, into minimal, modest, serious, what would be the factors that would help you look at a slope that you want to ride and decide, okay, is this kind of minimal consequence? Is it more modest consequence, or is it more serious consequence? Or, also another way of saying how bad is the terrain trap?
Sometimes if you can easily get out of cross in a way to safety.
Ooh. That might show up on this list. How about before we get into, is there a good escape?
Yeah,
Because
that was
I think about that a lot before I ride something. What's the biggest factors? Slope angle. Yep. Okay, let's see what we got here for one. Oh, they all came up at once. They're supposed to come one at a time. All right. So slope angle. See, and I didn't really put that in there.
Slope angle is isn't it more of a predictor?
It's more of like the, like built into how likely is it to slide. So this is more like, how consequential is it?
If it does slide.
If it does slide. So, yeah, size of the avalanche. I mean, we were just talking about that. And so storm slab is going to produce less size than a persistent slab, but also, the slope itself is going to determine how big the slide is. Right? So, I mean, we could almost even break this down into how do we classify avalanche size?
Poorly.
What's that?
I said poorly.
Poorly, we have numbers for it, right? Right? So there's size 1, there's size 2, there's size 3, there's size 4. We can see size 5 is usually around here. But here maybe we can use that as one of the factors, right? And size 1, typically falls into this category with simple terrain and hopefully minimal consequence. Size 2 sort of falls into this challenging terrain, maybe more modest consequence, although we'll talk about other factors before we decide for sure. And then size 3 and up is kind of the place where complex terrain exists and potentially more serious. So that should be up there. And then remember, one of the aspects of terrain traps is how deep might you get buried. And so, so we look at the run out of a slope. How is the avalanche debris going to react if I'm in it and, when it stops? Is it all piling up because it's a gully or because there's a depression, or is the avalanche debris going to spread out? And a lot of people use airbags, to help with that staying on top, but you can, have basically your mental airbag, what's that term? but your mental airbag is about choosing the slopes where the avalanche debris is going to spread out, and then you have a much better chance of staying on top as opposed to getting buried deep. So that's an important one. And then, obstacles. Anybody know and I think this statistic is, kind of worldwide, what's the percentage of, again, without being morbid, but, we're talking about risk, so we need to consider this. But what's the percentage of people that die because of trauma versus asphyxiation?
30%?
I think around 25, right? But that's worldwide, right? That includes Europe, which is mostly alpine. There's no statistic for southern BC, but what would you guess it would be? It's much higher, right? I always kind of think it's probably around 50%. And if you look, and there are statistics, you can go on to Avalanche Canada and look at previous avalanche accidents. A lot of the fatalities in southern BC area is from trauma, right? So this has to be like, especially around here, really high on our list of, what do we want to, how are we going to manage our risk of it? And it's such a tricky one too, right? Because what's one of the factors affecting the likelihood of avalanches?
Group dynamics?
That's related to this.
Ground cover force.
Ground cover, sorry, but what else? What's probably an even bigger one that we utilize all the time around here? Trees, exactly, right? So a really good concentration of trees means the slope is a lot less likely to slide. But the presence of trees means there's more chance of trauma if we do get into an avalanche. So we have to grapple with that sort of duality of trees are going to help reduce the likelihood, but they're also going to potentially increase the consequences. So what we have to really watch out for are those slopes that kind of have only a few trees. That's my favorite area. Trees, that's what's really good. That's unfortunate. But where there's few trees, there's a greater chance of triggering, but there's still enough, right? So, but that's what we grapple with. And it's not that we're going out and we're, taking huge risks. We're obviously doing a good job. Kokanee Glacier, I'll just say because I work up there, looking back at statistics, I go back into the 90s, there were several avalanche fatalities in the 90s, there were several avalanche fatalities in the 2000s, and the last one was in 2011. And,
Yeah.
Anybody seen it? Oh, here we go. Right. Yeah, good. Yeah, people are more savvy, and and there's always some risk. So we have to be prepared for the next one. But Rossland Range, yeah, we've had a pretty good run lately, and I feel like we're doing a good job of managing risk. But those are the concepts that we're grappling with: is how many trees. Is this a slope that I really think is going to go today? And things like, Roma brought up, what's the chance of escape? Because there's a lot of slopes that I feel better about because it's like, wow, I'm just skiing right along the edge of this avalanche path, and if something, starts to crack or doesn't seem right, I can escape it easily versus, wow, I am committed as soon as I enter this slope because, there's just like so much terrain around me. There's no possibility of escape. And, it's not that I never ride the ladder, but I wait for, much more stable conditions to get onto a really committing piece of terrain as compared to something where, maybe it's a smaller piece of terrain and or it's an easier escape. So, so this is one of the factors that kind of influences that degree of risk and potential consequence. And then, this one I like, and it might not be something that we often think about, but our group rescue skills, and how are they? Because how many people are familiar with Cherry Bowl, the story? It's been very well publicized. And it's an inspiration, right, to all of us in the backcountry community. Terrace, a community, not that everybody in Terrace is like totally serious about companion rescue skills, but from what I understand, they take it more seriously, they practice more as a general rule. And in that particular, Cherry Bowl situation, call it coincidence if you want, but I think it really is more of a reflection on the type of community that's there. The 4 people that rescued the 3 visitors from Whitehorse that were buried 1.5 meters deep over 1 kilometer away in a size 3.5 avalanche were all fine and rescued by this group of 4 from Terrace. 2 weeks before, practice half a day doing companion rescue, and they talk about that in the videos. It's like, they felt like, thank goodness we did that, because without it, they didn't have any extra time. There were people pulling people out of the snowpack that were blue. So they got them out just in time. And, what a feat for them to do that. So I really like to think about them as an inspiration to go out and practice. And it's a hard thing to do. It's hard to have that discipline. But I think that it's a really important thing to consider. I guess you could talk about rescue skills, but skills as a whole. When we ride over here into the bigger lines, we want to make sure we've got the right group of people with us. because if we want that extra margin of safety, if something goes wrong, because if it goes wrong, it might go big wrong. And you know, I kind of included solo travel in that. I'm not saying solo travel is a bad thing, but if you're solo traveling and you're hoping, you know, that it's going to be small, or you know, all of these other things, you know, you don't have the advantage of your friends going to dig you out of a size 2 avalanche if you're buried. So. You know, so this is just some of these factors that, you know, kind of play into this idea of consequence. And this is obviously not what the Evaluator 3 is going to look like. It's hard to know what the third version will look like. But I know that there's lots of talk around, you know, really trying to address this idea of scale in the avalanche world, because the kind of the version 2 doesn't really address that in that slope evaluation card, and consequence. You know, how big, how consequential, and so we can really kind of hone in on what we kind of already do intuitively, right? So don't worry if it's like, I don't know, man, it's just too cerebral. I just go out there, I look at the slope, I make a decision about how you know, whether it seems safe to ride or not, and that's exactly what people that have experience do. It's just nice to have a way for people that are getting more into it to know at least what to be thinking about and what to look for. And that's kind of, you know, that's what avalanche education is trying to help people with those kinds of concepts. Questions? Comments?
This looks awesome. It looks so much more user-friendly that, like, I don't know what range terrain rating is.
Yeah, I'm going to be fighting for simple.
It's awesome.
Because it's tempting, right, to want to make it more complicated. Because it is. I mean, it's complex. You know.
Keith, why are the bands changing in their shape? And the Avalator 2, it's kind of a funnel shape, but this is more straight line.
Oh, it's just, you know, they were just trying to capture, they were just trying to capture, you know, the complex terrain being more yellow and avoiding the green. You know, mine isn't necessarily better, but I sort of feel like, you know, this one doesn't really have a green and complex terrain, but it's kind of close to green. Because, I mean, when's the ideal time to go into complex terrain? With low danger, right? Which doesn't happen all that often, although, you know, we've been in a nice spell of low danger. But yeah, I mean, you want to show that there's at least sometimes better than other times. But certainly, you know, when you're into moderate danger, you know, then I like this too, because it's kind of, you know, not that far away from the red. And that's what, you know, in 22-23 with the persistent and depersistent layers, I think half of the people died in considerable danger, but half the people died in moderate danger. Right? But it was moderate danger with a, you know, a big slap problem. And all of those fatalities, as far as I'm aware, were in, you know, more complex terrain. And a little side note, ding ding, you know, question actually, because you guys know the answer to this, is when we are dealing with those persistent and depersistent layers, so we're talking about layers that are closer to a meter or more in the snowpack, what are the places that are most vulnerable to triggering those?
Shallow.
Yeah, shallow snowpack areas, right? And that was the case in a lot of those fatalities. So, you know, they get into those kind of more complex terrain areas, a little bit more variability, not smooth coverage, some rocky areas. More questions or comments? Love it. Hey, before you go, we have been kind of a little slow in or transitioning from fall climbing to winter skiing. But we just planned another stated snowpack for the Rossland area, and it's going to be on January 31st. So let people know it'll get advertised. We really appreciate the museum. It's been a fantastic venue. But we're going to do something special for the Jan 31st State of the Snowpack. We're going to hold it at the Legion, and then we're going to have a concert afterward. Deadhead Red. Mark Steves on bass. Neil Bregman on drums.
The band's
we got
here.
the whole band's here tonight. Claire Fantas on violin. It sounds like maybe a couple other guests. But, yeah. So so we'll do a stated snowpack, on 31st, probably around 7:30, and do the band afterward. Yeah.
Thanks, Keith.
All right, everybody. So that's going to wrap it up for us here tonight. One more big round of applause for both Keith and Spark. Of course, there's still some cookies left on the table, so do us that favor, grab those before you head out. And hope you guys have a good night and stay back home. Thanks, Scott.